Welcome to the Ebb and Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle Tremblett, and I'm a firm believer that even when life doesn't go as planned, it is taking you exactly where you're meant to be. On this podcast, I'm here to help you finally release control of what you think you want and begin to just trust in the ebbs and flows of life. Each week, I will show you how to build that positive mindset, radiate with self-confidence, and cultivate an unshakable resilience. Let me prove to you that even when life ebbs, you will glow. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 105 of the Ebb and Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle Tremblett, and I absolutely know you are going to love today's episode. I don't even know where to begin. I just know you're going to love it. But before I say what this episode is all about, I want to tell everyone that's listening today that the podcast is also on YouTube officially. So I think I started with episode 79, posting every second day on YouTube, kind of in a bit of the archives of episodes. But I know there's so many people that have been asking me to post them on YouTube because a lot of people like watching the video and the dynamics of the facial expressions, and it is a different vibe. As I watched back the video version of some of the episodes, it is a different vibe than when you're just listening to audio. So if you're into watching podcasts on YouTube, feel free to check that out and listen/watch some old episodes. And then I think eventually I'll probably put all of the episodes on YouTube because why not? I have them anyways. So my guest today is Anne-Marie Zanzal. So Anne-Marie has done many second acts in her life, including going back for her master's degree at 42 with 4 kids between the ages of 2 and 14. When Anne-Marie was 52, she came out as a lesbian, and at that time, she was married to her now ex-husband for 27 years. It was the hardest and the best thing she has ever done. Because of this experience, Anne-Marie now works with other women, cisgender, trans, and non-binary folks comfortable in female spaces who are in the process of coming out later in life. Anne-Marie is also a life coach to people over 50, LGBTQIA+, or straight, who want to make change and create a happier and joyous life. She also hosts her own podcast that tells the stories of other people who have pushed the boundaries of what society expects from queer people. That podcast in particular is called Coming Out and Beyond. Anne-Marie lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her wife, who is an architectural photographer, and their incorrigible dog, Theo. Tonda and Anne-Marie are avid travelers, and their next adventure is to Thailand 2023. So as you can tell, I'm sure from that bio, Anne-Marie has a wealth of knowledge and experience both in grief and the experience of coming out later in life. So in this episode, we talk a lot about her ebbs of growing up in a chaotic childhood, having an alcoholic father, being married with 4 kids, even though she knew she wasn't straight. So she kind of felt stuck in that heteronormative world, even though internally she did not feel like it was right for her. She attempted to come out multiple times and eventually had a lot of therapists fail her as well. Eventually went through the divorce and went through marriage counseling. And of course, she had to go through a lot of grief of grieving that long-term marriage of hers and realizing that she was starting a whole new life. However, what comes with a lot of ebbs, as we know from this podcast, is a lot of glows. Some of the highlights that Anne-Marie shares with us in this episode is, surprisingly to me, as you'll learn, she found a lot of safety and solitude within the church, and she is actually an ordained minister, which I thought was really cool. The other glows, of course, coming out later in life and finding community and support. She quickly met the love of her life and fell in love, and overall, she just felt that she finally was starting to live an authentic life. She was no longer feeling restless or looking for something else, and in turn, feels truly happy today. So with all that being said, if you are in a situation where maybe you are questioning your sexuality, or maybe, you might be in your 20s, you might be in your 30s, or it might be later in life where you think, is it too late to really be the person that I truly am? You'll learn in this episode that it's absolutely not, and it's worth taking those courageous steps to start living an authentic life. So without further ado, let's get into this episode because I know you're going to love it. Enjoy. Anne-Marie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jenelle.
I did not realize that you live in Nashville. Are you a country music fan?
No.
Is that allowed?
Yes, absolutely. But what's really wonderful about Nashville is that there's so many amazing singers here that if you go into any bar, any dive bar, everybody's great musicians.
Okay.
So you never know what you're going to get. So it's
not all country. Yeah, there's probably a lot of like rock and everything.
Yeah. It's not all country. I mean, this is where they make country music, but there's not all country music here.
I've yet to be to Nashville, but two of my close girlfriends just did bachelorettes there, obviously. And I feel like I would love it there. I feel like the vibes are just immaculate. Now, you probably don't live where all the chaos is all the time, do you?
Absolutely not. No, I live a little bit north of the city, and the bachelorette parties are infamous in the city. It is definitely like, it's become very much like Las Vegas. You know, there's like what happens in Nashville stays in Nashville kind of vibe to it. But there's a lot of places in the city that are not just downtown. So if you ever go, let me know, because there's a lot of bars that in places that locals go to that very rarely do we go down to Broadway or Second Avenue. Really rarely, maybe once a year.
Everyone feels the same about Toronto, where when people think about Toronto, they think about Rogers Centre, Scotiabank Centre, where all of the tourist stuff happens. And people think that's what my whole life is. And I'm like, I never go to those places unless I'm going for an NHL game or going to a concert. But I avoid those areas like the plague. And people forget that like there's more to a city just where the tourists go.
Absolutely.
Now, have you lived in Nashville your whole life?
No, my wife's from Nashville.
Okay.
I'm from Connecticut, actually. I moved here 4 years ago. It's the first time I haven't lived in New England. So it's been a very interesting thing coming from the north and moving south. And my wife is what they call a Nashville unicorn, which is very unusual here. She actually grew up here. So she's very, very familiar with the city and, you know, knows all the shortcuts. Like she goes 10 different ways to the same place. And I still don't know how to get around.
So is that not the norm? People who grow up there leave and people always come into Nashville?
Well, I don't, it's just that Nashville really is the hub now for the music industry, the healthcare industry. Oracle is building their headquarters here. So we get a lot of transplants. And so I think the city has stayed, I mean, people stay here, but I think that the people moving in is just far outnumbering the people who stay.
When I was reading your bio and learning some things about you, this may be super naive of me, but I was so shocked to realize how involved you are with the church.
Yeah, I was.
Are people usually shocked by that?
No, to be very clear about this, I'm not anymore, but I am an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, which is a progressive Christian denomination. And I was been involved with several denominations in my lifetime. It was a big foundation for me. And I became a minister when I was in my 40s. And since I've come out, I did pastor a couple churches since then, but decided that I don't want to do it anymore. So, yeah, no, people aren't surprised by that. Actually, people in the South, especially in Nashville, a lot of the queers down here are actual churchgoers, to tell you the truth, or they're looking for churches. Yeah. Every part of the United States, there's a little different flavor with that stuff. But a lot of the gay people down here, you know, grew up often in conservative religious backgrounds, Church of Christ, Southern Baptist, Pentecostal. And so when they come out, they often still remain churchgoers. So it's not unusual down here to be somebody who goes to church and to be gay.
Interesting. I wouldn't put a blanket statement on that where I'm from at all, but I think I mostly just would have drawn the correlation between someone not feeling accepted in their everyday life. And most often Catholic churches and Christianity churches often aren't very inclusive. So I'm sure there's a lot of churches that are very inclusive, but the ones that I know are not, because I grew up Christian as well.
Well, first of all denominations and all religious traditions have various, you know, you go from super conservative to super progressive. And so, you know, the Jewish faith, even in Islam, I mean, they all have different flavors of the same faith. Now, you know, then we can start arguing which one is the true one and stuff like that. But I don't engage in conversations like that. But I mean, there is all different types of inclusive congregations out there and inclusive churches and synagogues and mosques. Just because a church identifies as Christian doesn't mean they're like, I mean, I was like, my being a lesbian within my church community, that's where I got, nobody cared. Like, seriously, nobody cared. So it was no big deal when I came out.
Good. That makes me so happy. Now, you did mention that you had a chaotic childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Why? You don't have to go into it too much because that's not, or it could be that we're here to talk about that. It could all link, but
well, I think a lot of people, well, no, actually, no. A lot of people have chaotic childhoods.
Yeah.
And,
even if we don't realize it yet.
well, yeah. And, I say that because, a lot of us grow up in either alcoholic, drug addicted, sexually abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive homes, or all of that. My dad was an alcoholic. And so it made my home life quite chaotic. And so at that time I was Catholic because that's what my parents were. And church actually provided a place of safety and certainty. I knew what was going to happen. I knew what was going on. And also I went to Catholic school and I excelled at school. So I knew exactly what to expect and I knew what the rules were and all that. While at home, it was a little bit more difficult to discern what those were on any given day. So actually, church and school were places of safety for me during that time of my life. And I know that for other young people, especially in the Catholic Church, especially with young boys, that wasn't the case, but it was for me.
Do you find many other areas of your life that you tried to almost keep it stable or maybe become people-pleasing tendencies because you wanted to keep the peace in the areas you could control?
Yeah, I think a lot of us, those of us especially who grow up in chaotic homes, often get married because they want to be safe and secure. And so after, my later teen years and stuff like that in college, I ended up meeting a man who was going to keep me warm and safe and dry and vice versa. And we both wanted the same things. We met at a time in our lives where we were like 25 and 28. No, we weren't. We were 26 and 25. We got married then at 25 and 28. And our friends were getting married. It was like what people were doing. And we liked each other. We loved each other to some degree. But I think both of us wanted something out of life. And that's why we were like, okay, you'll do. And we married each other. A lot of people do. I mean, like, we have to be honest about that. A lot of people like start looking around when they get to their late 20s and they're like, okay, I've got to find a mate. And in my family, it wasn't like people were outwardly homophobic or anything like that, but it just wasn't an option. So I looked for a husband and I found one.
What narrative was around you, or what were some of the things that were said around you by family or friends that made you feel that blanketly being queer is not an option?
So I came of age in the 1980s, specifically right about 1985, 1986, when AIDS really came on the scenes. And homophobia was everywhere. Of course, as always, it's directed at gay men, not so much at gay women. But, when you're living a straight life and you're 22, you don't know the difference, So, I heard that all the time. And also, too, like, people that have come out, like people my age, I'm in my late 50s, people who came out then, it was pretty extraordinary when they did, because like my wife was outed. So like she had no choice. She was outed and disowned. And so she was out and disowned, and the queer community became her family. Also, too, it wasn't so much the message was that I can't be gay. The message is you have to get married and have children. That's what,
even if you're gay, like,
yeah. But the gay thing was like so not on the radar. You know what I mean? I think what people don't realize is that like from where we are now to where we were then, it is like so different. Like, my wife gives an example. When she came out, people were so closeted that other gay people wouldn't hang out with her because they didn't want people to know that they were gay.
I've heard these stories.
Yeah. And so it's it was a much different world. It really was.
I hear that from some of my gay guy friends that say, yeah, when I was first coming out, the most homophobic people were other gay men. And hearing them say that, I was like, that's shocking. Like, aren't you, like, you're going through the same.
It's called internalized homophobia.
Yes.
And the thing is that, I was so naive when I came out that I thought everybody that was out before me, like, had it all figured out, didn't have any internal, I just thought that. And now, having been in the community for the last 6 years, there are a lot of people that haven't dealt with their internalized homophobia. So, like, that means, like, not bringing your girlfriend to family dinners, not bringing your boyfriend to family dinners, not letting your girlfriend, even though you've been together for 5 years, post pictures of you online, not showing affection in public, introducing someone as your friend and when they're your partner. I mean, there's all kinds of little ways that internalized homophobia shows up. And there's even, like, one thing, like, sometimes in the gay community, there's a wide range of how people show up as a gay person. So sometimes in our own community, if someone is, like, very flamboyant or like a queen, people will say, I'm gay, but I'm not that kind of gay, and so that's internalized homophobia too. So it's just, we're human beings. Like, it's not a monolith. We have no agenda. We're just people trying to figure it all out,
Even straight people they say, oh, I'm not homophobic, but you can sense it when they say things like, yeah, like, he's gay, but, like, he's cool. He's not like super gay. You know what I mean? They say things like that. And what they're saying is he's not flamboyant. He doesn't do drag, that kind of stuff. And it's like, they still like the same gender, the same type of person, just because how they show it. Why are you okay with one version, not the other? It is a little bit still homophobia.
Oh, and it's a lot homophobic.
I want to jump into the meat of everything and why we're here. I've interviewed a woman before that came out not later in life, but came out at age 33. But if you're coming out at the age of 52, correct? Yeah, 52. Oh my God, that's different. That's 20 years different. And I'm not even 33 yet. So it's like, I know what can happen between those pivotal years of getting married, starting a family. So my first question, and it's an obvious question. Do you think you always knew?
Oh, I did.
Oh, okay.
So let me just say, I work with people coming out later in life. Coming out later in life is self-defined. The youngest people I work with are 25, and the oldest people are 75 plus. So your 33-year-old woman certainly qualified as somebody who's later in life.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like one of those things, like, I knew, but I didn't know. Like, I noticed my attraction when I was younger. And, like, I always joke that, like, there's this old joke that all straight girls are 3 drinks away from a lesbian encounter. And that's sort
100%.
Yeah. So that's what I sort of, I just, like, and nothing ever happened. But also too, I consciously questioned whether I was gay in my early 20s and stuff like that. And when I got married, I put it away. Like, it wasn't like it was this big, huge issue that we were dealing with or anything like that, but I just put it away in the box in the shelf in my closet. And then when I was raising children, it really started, I didn't think about it at all because I was busy raising kids. And then when I was about 42, I read an article in Oprah magazine, which talked about the fluidity of women's sexuality. And it was such a pivotal moment for me because I realized that although I had started down the straight path, I didn't need to stay on the straight path forever, because in the article, they were talking about women who had previously been with men and married, are now with women or married to women. And so that gave me, like, a sense. It put, for the first time, first of all, it was like visibility. I mean, we need that. And it gave me words to something that I had only thought about in my head. And so seeing that started a 10-year odyssey of me attempting to come out. So it took me a long time to come out. And that's
I love the word. Go ahead, finish your thought.
Odyssey?
No, I'm just loving your word of attempting to come out. So tell me about the first attempt.
Well, the first attempt was back in 2010. I was doing a residency at a hospital, and as a chaplain, and I was doing a residency, and I told my now ex-husband then that I thought I was gay. He said, no, you're not. And, I didn't want to be because I knew the kind of decisions I would have to make.
There's going to be a lot of change if basically you want to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. So he said, no, you're not. And I said, okay. And I also was working with a therapist and I said, I think I might be gay. And she said, have you ever slept with a woman? I said, no. And she never mentioned it again.
In her mind, is that the answer? Well, no, you're not. Like, why did she?
Yeah, she was like, no, you're not. I'm like, I'll tell you, the therapeutic world for me and a lot of other people that are queer, especially later in life queers, really have failed. But the thing is, too, is that I was looking for the professionals to give me to say, yes, you're gay. And really the only person that can say that is me. So we were just, they couldn't do it. And then the second time was in 2014 and it had been 8 years. And my ex-husband and I were in marriage therapy and we actually had a lesbian therapist. It was just, the universe.
By coincidence. Did she know?
Yeah.
Did your husband know?
Yeah, she knew she was a lesbian. And, I said to her that I thought I was gay and she sort of dismissed it.
Again.
She did. And then the last time I was still with the same therapist. The last time it just a bunch of things had changed. And I also knew that I had to do it this time. And what I did differently is that I Googled late in life lesbian and I found a mutual support group for women coming out later in life online. And that changed everything for me because all of a sudden I had community. I was reading things that women were writing that I had only thought in my head and that they were speaking my language. And so that's what changed everything for me. It really did.
It's not the same on my end, obviously, but I understand that feeling of feeling a certain way and then finding that support group or finding a blog and someone describing their situation. Right. It's like, whoa, finally someone put words to it. And that could be as something as coming out, getting kind of like self-diagnosing ADHD. It could be, or being like, oh, I should probably break up with my partner. Once someone puts words to it, you're like, that's exactly how I feel. Thank you. And it gives you so much, I want to say hope, but the validation for sure.
Absolutely. And also too, if you study the work of Christine Neff, and she does a lot with self-compassion, she speaks about our shared humanity. And so when we find somebody or a group of people that share the same humanity about us, our common shared humanity, it ends up helping us so much and also helps us to have the often compassion that we need.
For yourself, of course, as you said, self-compassion, but the compassion for others. I'm shocked at the therapist, especially the lesbian therapist, not wanting to dive into that. You're in couples counseling, like there is a diamond to deal with.
Yeah. And actually I think because, she had been married when she was younger, but to a man, but she was like 70 and she had been in the queer world where people didn't come out later in life, or she didn't know people like that. If they did come out, they came out in their, 20s or something like that. But she's also a human being. And I think she was very vested in saving our marriage. And she really liked the both of us, and so
Great.
She was, so I'm giving her I'm giving her a pass. It worked out the way it was supposed to work out. And I probably could have done it then. I definitely could have done it then. But, everything fell into place. Like that group, when I joined it, it was like 3 months old. And so this was 2016. And so I was the 180th member. And by the time it disbanded, it doesn't exist anymore. There were 2,400 people in it.
Wow. So, why did the group end?
The woman who admin didn't want to do it anymore.
Oh, I'm surprised she just didn't let someone else take the reins.
She did. She sent them over to my group.
Oh, okay, amazing. You're like 2,400 of you come with me.
No, about 700 came. That was fine.
Still 30% or about 28, 30%. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I love that. So what was the final straw? And I know you talk about this in all your blogs and everything, but more just so for the audience to tell them everything. What was the final moment where you're like, nope, we are opening this door. Let's go.
So what happened is I was a hospice chaplain and I had a
Can you tell
patient.
me what that is?
Yeah, I work with people who are dying.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All
So
ages.
all ages. No,
Okay.
no, there is a specialty for pediatric hospice, but usually people in hospice are usually in their older years, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I did spiritual care for people who were dying. And so
Oh, cool.
I was a hospice chaplain, and I had a patient that came onto hospice, and she was like 93, and she was like signed on to hospice and thought she was going to die the next day. People don't die the next day most times in hospice. Most people don't sign themselves on. So she was alert and aware enough to be able to sign herself on to hospice. And so I was visiting her, weekly and whatever. And then sort of towards the end, she started to get impatient because she was ready to die. And so she said, I feel like I've been waiting for something my whole life. And I was like really struck by that because she wasn't gay or anything. But it was like one of those deep core moments that I'll never forget. And so she died a pretty horrific death. 99.9% of people who die in hospice actually die pretty peaceful deaths. There was something that happened that just made her death very difficult. And so I held her while she died. And I was like, you can go, you can go, you can go. So I was ordained, a couple of months later, finally. I had a long circuitous ordination route. Everything is very circuitous.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And so the next morning after my ordination, I woke up and I said to my sister, I was taking her back to the airport, and I said, my ex and I are not getting along right again. And I need a soft place to land if I'm going to keep doing this work. And so I went back to see the therapist, the same one who, anyway, went back to see the same one.
Why?
Because she was really good in a lot of other things. Yeah, she was really
obviously if she's been in that field for so long, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, she messed, and just so you know, we had a big conversation about this, and she apologized profusely.
Okay, good.
So yeah. So
you have closure. I'm forgiven.
Yeah, I'm like fine. Yeah, I'm fine.
I'm new to this. I'm not over it.
Yeah, I was fine. So I went back to the same therapist, and so we started talking about things, and I had a little bit of PTSD from what happened. And so I started telling her that story. And she, being the consummate therapist that she is and was, she said, "What are you waiting for, Anne Marie?" And I said, well, and it's like I literally had my life flash before my eyes, like remembering, encounters and things that had happened and all that stuff. And I said, I think I'm gay. And then I started crying really hard. And I said, this is going to open up a Pandora's box. And she said, no, it doesn't. And I'm so glad she lied that night. So it did open up a Pandora's box.
Of course. But at least she gave you a little hope, thinking like, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be easy.
So sometimes, I work with all kinds of people that go through this. Occasionally there are couples that are able to navigate it, and it's not like a shit show. There are couples that do that. And it depends really on both the husband and the wife being really like kind and gentle and loving.
Well, I had a friend over right before this podcast interview, and he was like, oh, like, what's your podcast interview about? Like, what's the guest talking about? So I was telling him, and then we were chatting, and I was saying to him, I was like, if I was in your husband's position, like maybe, and I could be maybe 20, 25, 30 years from now, I don't know. And I said, I don't think I'd be angry. I think I would be really kind and open and allow that person to just become who they are. And I don't know if that's an individual thing. I don't know if that's a generational thing. I don't know. And he was like, yeah, no, I can see that about you. It's like, you just let people grow and
I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on, it could be a generational thing because there's so much more visibility of the queer community. And so everybody's exposed to it. But my ex-husband was not too upset about me. In fact, when I came out to him for the third time, he said, oh, thank God. Because I think it meant for him that all the problems in our marriage could land squarely on my gay shoulders. But really, for him, it was really about the divorce and finances.
Ah.
And that's for a lot of people. That's where things devolve when you get divorced, when it's about finances. I mean, yes, there are some people that are really punitive around emotions and stuff like that. But for us, it just devolved around that. And it's actually, the thing is that when people go through crisis, they tend to go through crisis the same way all the time. So it really doesn't, like, I knew him, I knew his relationship to money. So it doesn't surprise me that it happened that way.
You knew what he was going to worry about.
Mm-hmm. I did. So I just didn't know what degree it was going to be, but it's over with now. And we have both gone our separate ways. He does not want to have a relationship with me. It's very sad for our children because we were actually a very close family, but he doesn't want to have a relationship with me. And recently I've just stopped. I don't even try anymore. And it's sad because we were together 27 years and we were not like miserable or anything. We're actually pretty happy. And so
and you raised 4 fantastic kids together, I assume.
Yeah, they are fantastic kids. Yeah. So we did raise 4 kids together, and it's just sad. It's sad for the kids too. It really is for them, but I have no control over that.
Given that a lot of the change is like, obviously you guys were having marriage problems anyways, but the final straw was like, hey, I'm coming out gay, or I am gay, and we're not going to be together anymore. You both have different levels and reasons of grieving. So What do you think he had to grieve from your perspective? And what did you have to grieve in terms of the divorce?
So when people come out later in life, and probably, what I'm saying about me, you would have to ask him what he grieved, but I'm just gonna, from your perspective, I'm going to say most likely how our family existed. And he never wanted to get divorced. From the outside world? Yeah. From the outside world. Yeah. And also from our inside world. We had a lot of fun together, so I think he grieved that. He never wanted to be divorced. I know he grieved that. For me, for people who come out later in life, there is such a grieving process. Oftentimes you grieve your identity, who you were, how you existed in the world. You grieve your marriage. Even when people are the ones that want the divorce, you still grieve your marriage. I grieved the way my family existed. I grieved the way my relationships with my children have changed, some of them. I grieved in my job at the hospice that I worked for. I used to be the public face of the hospice. I'm a pretty good public speaker. And once I came out, my boss didn't use me as the face of the hospice anymore. I moved from my home where I lived my entire life to here. There was just a lot of loss. I lost, like a lot of people who get divorced, I lost some of when a couple gets divorced and one of them comes out at gay, most time the straight spouse gets all the friends and all that stuff.
Really? You see that with all the people you coach as well?
Mm-hmm. Most times they get the most sympathy,
Really?
Yeah. And I also lost a lot of people who, the thing is when you get divorced in a very heteronormative community, and anybody who's been divorced can tell you this.
And it's Connecticut. Yeah.
About Connecticut. Yeah. People are afraid of people who get divorced. And so all my friends,
as if it's a flu.
Yeah, like it's a flu. And also there's a couple of things going on. People are afraid they're going to catch it.
That's what I'm saying.
Or their marriage sucks and they're like, God, they're getting divorced. Why can't I do it? Why am I too afraid? Why am I? You know what I mean?
They don't want to look in the mirror.
Right. And then there are the handful that also have these feelings and are and that stirs all that up too, of course. So yeah, it's just a tremendous amount of loss. And I am it's so much better than it was. And I'm 6 years out. And I would say probably about 6 months to a year ago, it started to get really better. So I don't have
5 years of turmoil, though, pretty much.
It wasn't turmoil, it was grief.
Yeah. And
which is different. When you're first grieving, it can be very, I don't know what's the word, tumultuous.
Yeah.
But the grief is, there's the bargaining, there's all, like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote about grief, and she talked about the 5 stages of grief. And really she was talking about people. She did her studies on people who were dying, but people literally took up her study and put it on people who were grieving, right? And that's not so much how it is, but I have found in my community that the way Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about grief in the sense of dying is a very apropos way, because, I see people do, the shock, the bargaining, the anger, the depression, and then the acceptance, and it's all mixed up. And it's because they are dying to a sense of self. And so that's why it so mimics death. And, as somebody who worked in hospice, it so mimics the death experience sometimes. And you also have a tremendous amount of joy and excitement and fun and all that stuff. So here you are holding the polar opposites in your hands at the same time, grief and joy. So it was amazing, amazing.
Talk to me about some of the bargaining that you did with yourself.
A lot of the women that I work with, and I think I probably did this to some degree too, is that a lot of times couples try to bargain to keep their marriage together. And so I had a client once and I told her exactly, and she goes, "Oh my God, my husband did exactly what you said he was going to talk about." And so basically,
as if you've never been through it before.
Yeah. And so basically, couples try to figure out a way to stay together. And so they discuss open marriage, they discuss polyamory, and they discussed having a threesome. And my ex-husband and I all did that, all within 2 days. And we went through them like, no, that's not for us. But
right.
Some people.
And there was no option where you felt in your brain you could have both. You didn't want what you currently had anymore because you're preventing yourself from real joy, I think.
So the thing is that when people are thinking they're being good allies, they'll say, "I don't care who you sleep with." That's not, like when they think they're being good allies. But being queer is so much more than who I sleep with. It's who meets my emotional, physical, intellectual, and spiritual needs as a partner. And so that bargaining happens with couples. And a lot of times they'll try to figure out a way for themselves to stay together no matter what. And when my ex-husband and I, for 5 minutes considered a threesome, I was like, "Listen, ex-husband, soon to be ex-husband, if I'm going to sleep with a woman, you're not going to be in the room." That to me, and that's how I went into the tangent about how when people think it's just about sex, and it's not. And I didn't want that. And I also find, unless people are practicing polyamory before this or had go into their marriages as open marriages, 95% it's only a stopgap measure before they end up getting divorced. That's the bargaining, right?
Yeah.
And so I bargained a lot. We did that between the two of us. But by the time I got to this point where, I came out to my therapist the 3rd time and everything, I wasn't bargaining anymore. I just knew I knew I had to do what I had to do. And I was terrified and so unbelievably sad.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if you weren't.
Yeah.
But do you think some people feel that when people are in your position, they don't feel sad?
I think people who don't give it too much thought probably think that, but anybody in my community knows what it's like. And I find also too, a lot of people in the queer community most people are very gentle about it and, and very kind and stuff like that. So, yeah.
I want to ask you how your kids handled everything. You have 4 kids. There's 4 different ways of handling this that could all be different. And I'm sure it probably was.
Yeah, that's exactly, like people always, think their children are a monolith, and they're not. Like my 4 kids handled this so differently. So
they're 4 individual people. So.
Yeah, absolutely. My 2 bookends, my youngest and the oldest did the best. The oldest, because she always knew about the problems in my relationship with her dad. And so she knew I wasn't happy. And so she did really well. And then my youngest did really well because he had to go through it. The other three were all grown up or in college or whatever. And he was 12. So he had to go through the whole experience. And he's done remarkably well. And we're actually really close. My two middles had a really hard time with it. I think because my second one had really idealized their father and I. They've come out as non-binary since then. Their father and I.
Both of your middle kids?
No, just my.
Okay.
My second one. The second one came out non-binary, and they go by they them pronouns. And so I think they were also dealing with all that, and on top of everything. And nobody wants your mom to come out before you do, And my third child, he was away at college. He was in love for the first time in his life. So he wasn't paying attention yet. Then he would come home and, Dad and I were divorced. He just wasn't paying attention. And so it was really hard for him because it was like, I remember it was like 1 or 2 years. It was, I think, 2 years after we had been divorced, and both my ex-husband and I are with our current partners. And my son was like, you can't bring them to my graduation. And we're like, no, that's not going to happen. And so both my ex actually called me up and said, what do you want to do about this? I said, I'm bringing Tonda. And he ended up bringing his partner as well, because I'm like, I'm not, we're not going to live like this. I'm not doing that. So yeah. So my son had a hard time with it. He really did.
And so it's been 6 years now. Has anything changed about how they've handled everything? Or is it kind of all the still same?
Well, the oldest and youngest are still the same. And the second oldest, after I set some really good boundaries with them, things have changed and they are doing much better. And our relationship is doing much better. And then my third child works for his father and is just very enmeshed with his dad and his life. So it's just that I don't see him but he's also 26. So then, do you have to ask yourself, is it, he's a 26-year-old man. He's living his life. I talk to him once a week for half an hour on the phone and that's it. But that's what most parents do when their kids are in their 20s and stuff. Kids don't really come back until their 30s when they start having kids and they're like, shit, this is hard.
and they start just reparenting themselves and realizing like, oh, my parents are pretty great. They did the best they could.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I want to ask you, how did you know? So did you date a bunch first when you first came out?
No, actually, I met my wife pretty soon after I came out.
Wow.
So I've only dated her.
Wow.
I know. I was actually sort of like, that wasn't on my plan at all.
No, you're like, let me go explore this new life that I'm part of.
And we met actually in that support group because she was friends with the woman who founded it. And she had just broke up with her longtime partner. They had been together for 13 years. And her partner left her for another woman. And so she was really grieving that relationship. And so we met in that group that I talked about. And she was in there just sort of like, she went in there because, maybe I can help. Yeah, maybe I can meet somebody, And actually, the ironic part, neither one of us talked to anybody else in there. And so,
funny, hey?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And then when my therapist asked me what kind of woman I was looking for, I said, well, I'd like someone who's been out a long time because I don't know enough about the community and I want somebody who really understands it and stuff. I said, I want somebody who has a good, healthy respect of religion and know about that stuff. And I said, I wanted somebody who had no children because I have 4 and that's way too many. And she messaged me 3 days later and I immediately put her in the friend zone because I had no interest in dating anybody. And so it
was just too new, was it?
Yeah, it was too new and I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And so we talked and it was really good though, how our friendship developed because it was just through, messaging and stuff like that. And she was still really grieving the breakup of her. And so I was in my comfort zone because I'm a grief counselor. So I just sort of talked to her. And then what happened is that I went I went with a group of women from this page to New York City because I lived close to New York City, and I did not have a very good time that day. And I was like, I came home on the train and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I don't know I just don't know if I can do this.
Why?
And so
What about it?
it was uncomfortable. I didn't feel like I fit in. It was all couples. And so that had something to do with it, probably, I'm sure. And I remember coming home and, we texted a little bit on the train. She said, give me a call. And I had been really resisting that. And so I was like, okay. And so I'll never forget it because I dialed her. I had her phone number and I remember looking at the phone and saying, if I push this button, it's going to change everything. And it did. And then
just a phone call?
Yeah, just a phone call. I just knew it. I am very intuitive. I'm super intuitive. So we ended up talking for another week or two. And then one day we started to flirt. And that was it. And then we had a long distance relationship for a year and a half. We've navigated a lot together. Moving down here, all the stuff, my very painful and messy divorce, because I was separated from my husband when we started dating. And, she's had health concerns. So we have been through a lot together in 6 years.
I bet. But it only makes you stronger. If you're going through that right away and you can get through it,
well,
you can do anything.
And I'm a huge believer in therapy and marriage therapy and stuff like that. So Tonda and I have somebody on retainer. We see her once a month.
Good. And I believe in that too. Like, if you're going to get married, I know people who do pre-marriage counseling. I believe in it. I think we go to a coach for our business at all points of our business. Why not at all points of our relationship?
Well, and I think it's important to, especially, both of us came to our relationship in our early 50s with a lot of baggage and from very different worlds, because my wife is from the LGBTQ world because she existed in the South and because she existed pre-2015 in the US, she couldn't get married, to her. So when you cannot marry your partner, if the things go wrong, you sort of like, you break up. And so she's had before me, she's had and the last one was 13 years, but she's had 5 significant relationships.
Right.
I had 2, my ex-husband and my fiance before him. And so we came from such different, totally different where I was heteronormative, checked all the boxes, did everything, and she didn't. So we came from very different worlds. So it took us a long time to be able to navigate all that stuff.
And communicate and understand each other. Yeah.
Yeah. We have a great therapist now. We really like her. We see her once a month.
Well, it just goes to show you can have a lot of love for someone and know you're extremely compatible, but you still have to teach each other how to learn about each other and communicate.
Well, yeah. And also too, mostly things go south in communication with your partner. It may start out with, the milk wasn't put away right in the fridge. And then you end up in a screaming match with them, because what happens is you both trigger each other's inner child or inner trauma. And all of a sudden you're in a place how the heck did we get here? And so Tonda and I come from my ex-husband and I did too, because we always partner with people that feel familiar to us.
Yeah.
Both of them have come from significant childhood trauma. So our trauma would butt up against each other when we first, were together. And we had to learn to navigate all that and really have only really been pretty successful since we got married. We got married a year ago yesterday. So
congrats.
Thanks. So it's really been since we got married that we were able, it's just things have gotten a lot better.
October 9th. What a beautiful day to get married.
It was a beautiful day. It was the best thing ever. People still talk about it. It was so much fun.
Was your ex-husband invited? Just kidding.
No.
I'm just kidding.
No,
oh my God, can you imagine? Did he send congratulations at least? Anything?
No. But when we did get engaged, he did, send an engagement card and stuff like that. Okay. But, our lives, there is some philosophies in the universe that we meet people and we have soul contracts with them and stuff like that. And I do believe that I met my now ex-husband for a time in my life, and we did something together. We raised a family and we had children. And honestly, my wife always says to me, if you were straight, you would have left him a long time ago. I think she's right, because I was dealing with so many other things that I think if I was a straight woman, I would have been like, okay, this isn't working. And I would, and believe me, I said that plenty of times in our marriage. And also too, in the later in life community, we almost have like we joke, we're all married to the same man, because typically we marry men that are emotionally unavailable, is a good guy. People like them, like in the community, people like them. They think they're really nice people and stuff like that. And they're good dads. So in our heteronormative world, that's like, except for the emotional unavailability part, that's what women want. Like that's the stand, like as long as you're married to a good guy, that's okay. And so we're not allowed to want anything more than that. I have some really good pieces in my blog called Good Guy and Good Girl. You should read them.
I will, trust me.
I talk about all that stuff, because we marry, what entails a man to be a good guy is, they're not emotional, physical, abusive. They are good wage earners. They are good dads and help now and then. And women to be a good woman, like
in our scroll.
Yeah. Like, did I mention anything about their physical attributes? No. Women have to be the emotional caretakers of their family, of their husbands, and of their families. They have to take care of every aspect of their family's life. And I just want to say that there is a bell curve, and I know there are men that, I do exactly what I'm talking about here. So, but also too, women have to do so much and have to give so much, and they have to put everybody's emotional needs before their own. And so whether you're gay or straight, that is the truth as living as a married woman. There was really actually a great article just recently in the New York Times about like how hard it is to be a married woman. And it's by a woman who got divorced and was like, this is a heck of a lot better than being married.
A lot easier. No responsibilities.
Well, yeah, you have
yourself.
Yeah, but you have, and your children, but like there's a lot of expectations placed on married women. It's a very thankless job, honestly. Extremely. It really is. Yeah.
Extremely. Last topic, because I'm already holding you for longer than I told you due to my fire alarm stuff. When I asked in the form before we started this podcast, I said, when you look back at the ebb and the difficulties that you went throughout all of this, how did it make you glow today? And you had a very simple answer. You said, I have a certainty of who I am and what makes me tick. I live an authentic life. And I would say majority of people listening to this podcast today, that's their goal in life, to live an authentic life.
Yeah.
How does authenticity feel to you now?
Just because I'm living an authentic life doesn't mean all my problems have gone away. They haven't. I still can struggle with sadness and struggle with anxiety and all the things that I have in the past. But the difference is that I'm no longer restless. I'm no longer looking for something else. Like, in my entire marriage, I kept thinking, is this all there is? This doesn't feel right. I was always questioning everything. While in this relationship with my wife, I don't do any of that. I just don't. And it helped me set example with my kid, like a couple of my kids, able to set boundaries and being okay if people that I love walked away. I'm like, and that didn't happen, because that never happens when you set boundaries with people that need it. But things like that. And so I'm very certain of who I am. I know what I offer this world. I've always been really good with working with people. So, I kept doing that and building that business. And so it's been the most brutal thing I've ever done in my life. And I never, ever want to do anything like that again. But I'm sure I will, because people I love will die and stuff like that. But it was also the best thing I've ever done. And I'm happy. I'm seriously happy now. There was always an undercurrent of sadness with me before, and there isn't anymore.
Probably just not feeling like who you really are.
Right. Yeah. I feel like this is where I belong. This is where I fit in. Even way before it came out. If with my family and I went to a party and there was a gay couple there, or I'd be like, wow, because I'm showing my hands. Like I needed to be with my people, and I didn't understand all that then, but now I get it. I need to be with my people, and I need to be with people who understand what it's like to be queer and to be queer in a heteronormative world. And even though I've lost a ton of privilege, going from, a white married woman, and I still have a lot of privilege. I'm still a white girl. Going from a white married woman to a lesbian, I've lost a ton of privilege, but I'm okay. I'm fine with that. That's okay. I would give up that privilege any day for this.
Last question for you. Anyone listening to this right now who feels maybe they're not living an authentic life, or maybe feels like what you said, there's just this weird level of sadness, and I wonder if this is it. What kind of advice do you have for them?
Don't be afraid. If you are not happy as a young mom or as, a 30-something, don't be afraid to make the changes in your life that you need to make. And it is really, really normal. And it's part of human development to be 35, 40, and all of a sudden wake up one day and say, how did I get here? And because a lot of times our first half of our life is living the life that we were told to live. And while the second half of our life, for some of us, is the undoing of all that and living the life we're supposed to live, the one that we were created to live. So letting go of fear as much as possible. And it doesn't have to happen all overnight. Like there's an old saying, in the Chinese fortune cookies, the journey of 1,000 big miles begins with one step. So every day, just take one step to where you want to go. And all of a sudden, a year or two's time, you'll look back and be like, wow, I've come so far, and don't expect change to be. Sometimes the darkest moments in a lot of change and transformation is right before the dawn. And that's when, so sometimes the real hard parts are really messy and awful, but then things do get better.
A rock bottom, one would say, before it all gets better.
Yes, absolutely.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much. I want you, before you go, to plug your book, your website, your blog, your coaching program for anyone who wants to connect further. Plug where they can find you.
So I have a website. It's annemariezanzal.com without the hyphen. I also have a book called Authentic Peace. It is on Amazon, but you can also find it on my website. I have a podcast as well. It's called Coming Out and Beyond. And the first season is all women. If you think you might be gay and you're a female, and when I say female, I mean cisgender, trans, and non-binary folks comfortable in those spaces. And, listen to the first season, because that's the first time, where a bunch of women talk about their later in life journey. And I also do individual counseling, and I have a group coaching program. So on that website, or you can reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. We can take a half hour, and I talk to everybody for free for a half an hour.
And I mean, you've talked on here for an hour, and anyone listening right now can feel your warmth coming through, even if they're just listening through audio. It's very, very clear, your warmth, and the compassion is so there. So I think anyone who's going through anything that you've went through in the past, I think you could be a great resource for them. So thank you so much for coming on here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jenelle.
Did you know that I'm not only a podcast host, but in my full-time career, I am a Toronto-based real estate agent. In 2021, I closed 100 deals. Yes, you heard that correctly, 100. So if you or someone you know is a busy professional looking to get into the Toronto real estate market and looking to work with a realtor who values your time, make sure to reach out to me and let's get connected. And in the meantime, we'll see you here back next week.